Start. Hare Krishna, and welcome to this inaugural presentation of Glowing Gaudiya Legacy Open Worldwide Institute, non-governmental. We inaugurated this institute today on Akshaya Tritiya to augment the blessings of the Lord, and I hope of all the Vaishnavas. Let's wait for a few seconds. Okay, so I like to start in time to honor those who are punctual. So we'll start right now. Let me put a little extra light. I have a PowerPoint for you that I want to share. And so we start. Varnasrama. I hope everyone is familiar with the concept. But if you're not, it means this is God's social system. Human society is divided into 4 occupational duties and into 4 stages of life for spiritual advancement. First, there is brahmacharya, period of studying and preparing, then grihastha, life as householders, then vanaprastha, life as retired people, and for some people also there is sannyas, the life of renunciation. So varnashrama, the basis of varnashrama, as I will explain today, is the traditional system of Gurukula, the school of the Guru. Now, if we have Varnasrama without Gurukula, then his Varnasrama is just a hobby. Hobby doesn't mean something bad. Hobbies can be sattvic, can be healthy, but still, it's not a central occupation for someone. So talking about Varnasrama, establishing Varnasrama, without really making an effort to establish the schooling system of Varnasrama, it's like a hobby. So, Srila Prabhupada said, you have to establish Varnasrama. This was in a morning walk on the 5th of February, 1976. Particularly important morning walks. This photo is not necessarily from that time. This is from earlier. Same place, Mayapur, when there were no many buildings. So the idea is this is an important instruction, especially because it was to all the leaders that they were walking with him. Those were the time of the Gurukula Festival, the time of the GBC meetings. And of course, he repeated that instruction many times. He wanted to establish Varnasrama. Now, different people see this instruction through different filters, you could say. Each of us has got their own background. Each of us has got their own culture, conditioning. And so we see and consider Varnasrama in different ways. Basically always through the 3 gunas, the 3 influences of the modes of nature. So Bhagavad Gita 18:19 says, according to the 3 different modes of material nature, there are 3 kinds of knowledge. And that applies also to knowledge of Varnasrama. So different Varnasrama conceptions One in tamoguna, means in ignorance. You see here in the picture is like the square, very, very rigid, very limited, narrow-minded, what I call pseudo-Vedic. Sometimes people may try to impose certain ideas which are very nostalgic but very impractical. They focus more on details than on principle, on the essence. And sometimes that type of varnashram is not very beneficial for the participants. Then you have a conception of varnashram in rajas, maybe compared to this person who thinks with the pyramid or the triangle in mind, because it's very hierarchical, and of course, varnashram is hierarchical, but when it's based too much on the body, too much on the concept that we're not spirit soul, but we are the body, we are this gender, we are this social position, and so there is a lot of stratification or even competition, then it's a varnashram in Rajaguna. But then there is also varnashram in Sattvaguna. That means varnashram in which we understand that we are all spirit souls and we have different bodies, but we all participate of a divine nature. We are all parts and parcels of Krishna, of God. And in Sattvaguna, especially in Shuddha Sattva, the center is some Siddhir Hari Toshan. The perfection of this varnashram is to please the Lord. Now, because there are different conceptions and there is so much debate, is there anything that we can all agree on? What can we all agree on? I believe there are certain aspects we can all agree on. For instance, that devotees need to situate themselves in a normal circumstance in their own nature, and they should serve the Lord according to their psychophysical setup. They shouldn't try something artificial. So engage in the Lord's service according to one's acquired nature, one's swabhava. Also, I think we can all agree that we should have good brahmacharis. Brahmacharis should be very studious, very austere, very dedicated to the service of the guru and of the mission. I think we can all agree we want good brahmacharis, not hypocrites or pretenders. Then we want good grihastas. That means stable couples, solid families, very charitable, very exemplary, very responsible. Then we want good vanaprasthas, people who don't look back when they retire from work and from social responsibilities, people who are really in a phase of detachment in life. And then, of course, we want good sannyasis, persons who are renounced and they're exemplary in society as leaders, as teachers. They provide spiritual wisdom to all the varnas and all the ashrams. I believe we can all agree on these things at least. Now, let's understand one thing. Every society, every type of civilization, every type of human consortium has got a certain type of education with certain subjects, with certain values, with certain priorities. So a particular society creates a particular system of education. And the people coming, the children, the young people coming from that education also create a type of society. So it's a circle. Say an industrial society establishing education to create managers and workers and technologists, and those technologists reinforce, reiterate, and perpetuate the industrial society. So a certain culture creates a certain education perpetuates the culture. Therefore, it's essential that to have a Krishna conscious society or Daiva Varnashram, we need the proper education for that. Otherwise, how is it possible? We have one type of education, which is not Varnashram education, is not Gurukula, then how we can create a Varnashram society if the education for that society is not the right education? Let's use this analogy of a tree. The tree is the tree of Varnashram. And education is the root of the tree. You can see here strong, deep roots give a very beautiful and strong tree. Srila Prabhupada says in the Bhagavatam, first canto, in the system of Varnashram Dharma, which is the beginning of actual human life, small boys after 5 years of age are sent to become brahmachari at the guru's ashram. So this is the system. Srila Prabhupada was writing this even before coming to the West. So it's one of the fundamental social teachings of Krishna consciousness. So Guru Ashram means Gurukula. And of course, Srila Prabhupada also spoke a lot about Varnashram school or Varnashram college. Now, the first part of this presentation deals with emphasizing, analyzing, exploring how important this was for Srila Prabhupada. Let's see, this morning walk in Vrindavan, 14 March 1974. From 5 to 10 years, Gurukula. And after 10 years, they should go to the Varnashram college. So Gurukula means the basics to create character, to create values, to create spiritual standards of life. And then after 10 years, and of course, Srila Prabhupada said many also slightly different things, maybe 10, maybe 12, maybe 14. But the basic idea of Gurukul is for the beginning of childhood. And then that it will be like a vocational type of training according to their nature. Now, I want to make an important point here. When we talk about Gurukul, now this seminar will not get into the details of how to run a Gurukul, or if the student should go home to sleep, which they could, or what time should they go, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 7 p.m. We're not going to discuss the details. We're going to focus on the principles. So first principle to understand, Srila Prabhupada wanted Gurukul, and actually he did establish Gurukul as best as he could with the people he had, but he did. Is one of the things that he personally established. Now, same morning walk, for him, this was not just an internal education system. For him, this was the way of reshaping society at large. Now you'll be trained up and revise the whole edition of the Western civilization, especially in America. Then a new chapter will come. This is the program, the 4 Varnashram school required. So he's introducing this idea that this is really the root of the Krishna conscious revolution. Without this root, how can you, to use this word, revise the whole edition of the Western civilization? This is in the books, Srimad Bhagavatam 7th canto. So it's extremely important because it's an official statement, public. And Srila Prabhupada says this, formerly the Brahmana, Kshatriyas, and Vaishya, everyone but the Shudras were trained in the Gurukula. There have consequently been many instances in which great kings and emperors have given up household life. They could give up all their possessions because they were trained early as brahmacharis. This is very important. In modern materialistic life, education is seen more or less just to build skills so that one can work and can earn and can maintain oneself. But the traditional Krishna conscious concept is different. You go to Gurukul, you develop certain values, certain deep faith, and then at the end of your productive life, at the end of your grihastha life, you can actually detach because you already live in that type of atmosphere. It's not a shock, it's not a trauma, it's actually a welcome change for decades of working, then you move on. But it will be very hard if you have not been in Gurukul, you don't have that experience. But here Srila Prabhupada says, even great kings and emperor could give up household life because they were trained early as brahmacharis in the school of the Guru. So to use this analogy, more the root is strong, the more the tree will be solid. So ideally, we want our children to have a very, very good experience, solid experience in Gurukula, then move to Varnasrama college for their vocational training, and then fit wherever they fit in the 4 Varnas and the 4 ashrams, according to their nature, according to what is beneficial for them. Now, I want to emphasize now, I'm not saying that our children should not go, should never go out of ISKCON education, or should not go to college, should not go to university. I'm not saying this, but they need that strong basis in their character. Then, of course, if they need technical knowledge, if they need to become an engineer or a doctor or an architect or a historian, yes, of course, they can go anywhere and they'll be protected by their training, by their values. So, you have the tree of Varnasrama. If the roots are not strong, then can very easily collapse because people have not been trained to function in the Varnasrama. So Gurukul is the basis, and if you cut Varnasrama from Gurukula, if you try Varnasrama without establishing Gurukula, it will be a cut tree. So a few more quotes from our founder Acharya, Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, who stressed the importance. It's a letter to Mohananda, 72. If you become headmaster of the Gurukul, that is more important than going to South America. This is the most important post in pushing on this movement, the most important post to teach and create a great future generation. Letter to Stoka Krishna, also in 1972. I consider this Gurukul school to be one of our most important aspects of this movement, and it should be given all serious consideration by the member. And look at this picture. This is Srila Prabhupada with brahmacharis from Gurukula. This shows how he wanted and he directed in his presence his disciple to do it. So it's not just a theory, it's not just something that, yeah, one day we'll establish Varnasrama, one day we'll have Gurukula. No, Gurukula is the basis of Varnasrama. Letter to Dayananda Nandarani, husband and wife, next year, 73. Gurukula is our most important project because it creates very solid basis for everything else. If somebody is very good in brahmacharya, then it would be very good as a grihastha, very good as a vanaprastha, very good as a sannyasi. The training is missing, maybe shaking, maybe wobbling. Again, the book quote, so official, formal, solemn, 7th canto, In our Krishna consciousness movement, the Gurukula plays an extremely important part in our activities because right from childhood, the boys of the Gurukula are instructed about Krishna consciousness. Thus, they become steady within the course of their hearts. I found this very, very powerful quote because ultimately Krishna consciousness is in the heart. If a child grows up Krishna conscious, he will never give up the Krishna consciousness. Now, the question is why it did not work. Srila Prabhupada spoke those things some 50 years ago, more or less, half a century. But we see that as an institution, as an organization, as a society, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, we don't have a good record in creating Gurukulas. A few, of course, few positive experiences, few positive examples, but also a lot of failures, and sometimes failures even to try. But why, in some cases where we did try, it did not work? So I'll present a very simple formula based on what Srila Prabhupada said. It's a recipe that has got only 2 ingredients. So when you have only 2 ingredients, means both of them are essential. Let's see. One is that the best people should be engaged in teaching the children, in organizing the school. Now, sometimes we did the opposite. Sometimes devotees who could not collect or could not distribute books or could not do anything, you could say, useful in the temple, they were sent to Gurukula. This was such a low priority. So that's exactly the opposite of this recipe. First, the best people, and second, enough funding. Gurukula is not a money-making project. It needs to be funded and need to be investment. And of course, you will not invest in something you don't feel the importance for. So let's see a couple of quotes from Srila Prabhupada on each. First, on the best people. Same morning walk in Vrindavan, March 14, teaching should be done by the sannyasis. Just like in missionary school, the fathers teach. Now, this sentence may need a little bit of unpacking. Sannyasis are considered, of course, the spiritual masters of all the Varnas and all the ashrams, the top, the very top, the head of the Varnashram society. At the same time, some of the sannyasis have not been successful in their Gurukul attempts. So, and sometimes we hear about serious scandals for the sannyasis' involvement. So here we need to extract the principle. Srila Prabhupada is saying the best people should do it. And of course, in this time, the sannyasis were the most dynamic, the most dedicated to the mission. And so Srila Prabhupada was saying, teaching should be done with the sannyasis, but we should translate. If you have good sannyasis, great. They can run a Gurukul in a very mature, expert way, great. Otherwise, the best persons available. And this comes to the letter to Satsarup Maharaj. He was responsible of the Dallas Gurukul. That school is very, very important business, and the best men must be found out for taking charge there and developing it nicely. See, children are like sponges. They're totally receptive. Unless the best person is in charge to create the right atmosphere, to implement the right curriculum, to share from the heart, from the mind, the right values, you may have a disaster. You may actually traumatize many children, like unfortunately it did happen. Now the funding. Letter to Jayatirtha. All Grihasthas who are interested in doing business should do so in full swing. Let all the Grihastas who wish to execute business full-fledged, let all the Grihastas who wish to execute business full-fledgedly in the USA, and in this way support Gurukula. The profit from the business should first go to support Gurukula, and balance may be given for the local temple maintenance. Now, if you're a temple president, maybe you don't like this quote too much, because Srila Prabhupada say, first, the money from businesses, from Grihastas, should go to Gurukula, and then the balance may be given to the temple. But for Srila Prabhupada, that was the priority. Do business, make money, but the money should go first for education. Another letter. Something got frozen. Patience, sorry. Okay, another letter in this connection. Sorry. Sorry. Okay. Letter to Jagadish, another of his top leaders, one of his GBCs. The GBC should make an injunction that if they beget children, if the devotees, Grihasta, beget children, then whatever the expenses are for supporting Gurukula, they must pay for it. So Srila Prabhupada wanted the governing body commission to make an injunction, a resolution, a law. Yes, you have children, fine. Srila Prabhupada said we welcome hundreds and thousands of children, but the Grihasta should take full responsibility for maintaining them in Gurukula, not just finding the cheapest alternative with the local non-devotional school or whatever. No. Now, so these were a few quotes to show how our founder Acharya considered the Gurukula extremely important. He even said the most important thing to create the basis for our society and for Varnasrama. Now the question is, if Gurukula is so important, why so much neglect and reluctance? If you look around the world of ISKCON, we have so many successes in opening temples and distributing books, many other things, but we don't see many Gurukulas. So why so much neglect of these important instructions of Srila Prabhupada? Why so much reluctance, resistance? So we'll analyze 5 reasons. The first, perhaps the most important, is that our past haunts us. There was abuse in our Gurukulas, different types of abuse, from neglect to violence to sexual abuse. So our past, and we're talking also of our very recent past, we're not just talking previous century. So our past and our recent past, you could say even our present, because some of the revelations of the abuse they were very actual, very recent. So our past haunts us. We have been, of course, many children have been traumatized by the experience. Many had a beautiful experience, but some have been traumatized by the experience of Gurukula. We could say many have been traumatized. And so the whole movement has been traumatized. So obviously, before we can seriously talk about Gurukula, we should stop child abuse, or we should prevent it. We should have the systems in place. Otherwise, we don't have the moral stand for opening a school if we cannot ensure that the children in that school will be protected and will not have a agonizing experience or traumatizing experience. So first of all, we need to stop child abuse, and we need to implement all the mechanisms which are there to protect the children. So we need to go beyond the trauma as a community. And we need to also remember one thing. We have problems as a movement because it's a spiritual movement in the material world. So it's always a challenge to function. But let's also remember one thing, that other things we had problems, but we didn't stop. Like, for instance, unfortunately, many marriages ended up in divorce. But people are still enthusiastically getting married. Or sometimes temples closed down, or some temple was stolen, like by the Ritviks. They were snatched from ISKCON. But still we open temples. So my point is, we had few disasters in different areas, but somehow only Gurukula bore the brunt of that in terms of neglect, in terms of fear. For many leaders, when you talk about Gurukula, they feel it's something radioactive. The trauma of the children extended to the whole society. But this should not make us forget the instruction of the founder acharyas. We didn't do very well in the past, doesn't mean that now for the next 10,000 years we don't try again. But let's remember the recipe. Best people, mature people, qualified people, emotionally and spiritually stable people, to say better if Grihastha couples, and funding. Second reason why we neglect Gurukula is what I call the some slowness in my computer today, and I apologize for that. Not sure why. I just see the thing going around and around and around. I hope it stops soon. But what I call the number 2 is the new converts syndrome. Sociologically speaking, those who join Krishna consciousness as adults or as teenagers, they are new converts. I mean, some of you might have been from Hindu background, so the whole concept, religious concept, is not new, but specifically ISKCON, Krishna consciousness, may be something very new for you. So what is this new convert syndrome? Is thinking, I didn't go to Gurukula and I'm doing okay. Why do our children need it? In other words, you may be an adult, you may have joined when you were 18, 20, 25, 30, 40, I don't know. Each of us has a different history. But you may feel, I'm following principles, I'm chanting my rounds, I'm active, I'm doing okay. And I did not go to Gurukula. I went to some materialistic school or some ordinary school. So if I'm doing okay, why our children need it? And this is a kind of a logical thing, because if we are doing okay in our spiritual life, is despite the education we receive. Of course, education was precious in many ways to allow us to function in society. And of course, some good schools gave us also some good values, but certainly it was not a full Krishna conscious immersion school where we learned as a priority to love God and love Krishna. So this is number 2. Number 3. Again, this slow response. I'm not sure why. At the beginning, it was working fine. So number 3 is the problem, quote unquote, is that there is no money in it. If one looks for economic development, one should not look for Gurukula, because Gurukula is mostly an expense. Traditionally in ISKCON has been a challenge is sometimes to get the quota from the parents, the fees for maintaining the children, for feeding them, for the books, or for maintaining the student, the teacher also. So if we are Vaishyas, or to speak of Shudras, then we'll not give much importance because it's mostly an expense. It's an investment. You invest in children for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years with no immediate financial return. So that's one reason why there is not much interest in Gurukula. 4, Sattva Guna. Sometimes there is a lack of goodness. I mean, we all have our different natures, and our natures are dictated, are established by our gunas. So obviously, running a Gurukula and teaching is for Brahmanas, for people who are naturally in goodness. So when we are not in goodness, we will be attracted by more passionate activities, more dynamic. See, it takes a lot of patience, a lot of dedication. It takes time to see a child grow into a man or into a woman. And some people don't have that. They don't want to dedicate their lives just to see people bloom and grow in their spiritual and material life. They want to do something more that they perceive, in which they can perceive more immediate results